lost myself somewhere on the day came out crying. My broken light had gotten in the way. I couldn't find me. So open your eyes. You've got a good thing going.
Thanks so much for being here. My name is Gil Asakawa. I'm a special correspondent for the Nichibei News and Nichibei Cafe, and I'm here with singer-songwriter Kina Grannis. And yeah, it's so cool to have you here.
It's so
And
great to be here.
yeah,
Hajimemashite.
hi, hajimemashite ne. Actually, that will factor into a question I have for you
Oh,
later
okay, great.
about uh, your upbringing and some stuff about culture.
Great,
So, but thank you so much for taking the time.
of
Um,
course.
can I ask, is your mom Japanese American? Is she Nisei or Sansei or?
She, sorry. So let's see. Okay, first I'm going to insert a random fact before I forget, which is that my mom, after she grew up in on Oahu, and then when she was in middle school, I think she and her mother and sister moved to the Bay Area. And when my mom was, I don't remember what age, I have the date somewhere. Her mother forced her to be in like the cherry blossom pageant. And my mom is not a beauty pageant type person. She's like, doesn't like people to look at her and is super silly and not serious at all. But she was in the like San Francisco cherry blossom pageant years ago. So when I told my mom that I was gonna be part of this, she just bursted out into laughter. She's like, "I can't believe this. I have to tell your aunt. Oh my gosh." Uh, so my grandmother has a very unconventional Japanese name that we called her. We called her Obaba-sama growing up, which is like, "Oh, mighty grandmother," essentially. But she was like, "Oh my gosh, Obaba-sama would have like loved this so much because it was her city and it was a thing they were involved in." And my grandmother came to Hawaii when she was, I think, 20-ish. So she was from Tokyo and she married a Japanese American who was born in Hawaii. So my mom was then born in Hawaii. Um, so yeah, she had like an interesting mix where one parent was very, very Japanese and the other, well, of course, also very Japanese, but a different brand of Japanese, one from Japan and one from Hawaii.
Um, yeah, I can identify with that. My dad was born and raised in Hawaii, and my mom is from Hokkaido. So, and they met during the Korean War, and um, I understand that dynamic, that cultural
Yeah,
dynamic of
very
being
different.
American and being Japanese.
Yeah.
Um, but when you talk about not being very personal or emotional, that is so Japanese, right?
Mm,
You
mhm.
don't talk
Yeah,
about this stuff. You don't
yeah,
talk about wartime incarceration. You don't talk about being sick. You don't talk about your problems. You don't bring attention to yourself.
yeah.
And and you're kind of being the anti-Japanese that way.
Yeah. Let's talk about all our feelings. Yeah, it's interesting.
I think that's great. I think good for you. Um, we need more of us to be comfortable with our voice
Mm,
and share what's going on in our lives and in our hearts, I think. Um, I want to ask a little bit, Crazy Rich Asians, between that and Fresh Off the Boat, those two pop culture elements really started an avalanche, right? That and Always Be maybe,
Mhm.
and everything has led to things like Shang-Chi and Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
And this, I mean, what a great moment it is right now for Asian American, Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian, um, you know, artists and arts. And
Amazing. Yeah.
so, yeah, you were part of that. Uh, Part of that also is your multiracial heritage. Can you talk a little bit about growing up multiracial in Southern California? Of course, Orange County is pretty diverse, lots of Asians.
Yeah. So for me growing up multiracial or Hapa, as I kind of was the identity I grew up with. My dad is Caucasian, my mom being Japanese. Um, for me, I feel really lucky. It was only ever a wonderful thing. And I know for some people it can be confusing and conflicting. And for me, it felt like the best of both worlds. Like I just got to call more of the planet my own. And I loved growing up with the Japanese things that I did and with the food and the culture and a tiny bit of the language. My mom doesn't speak Japanese, but my grandmother does. And there's, some phrases and words that we always used around the house. Um, I loved kind of just, yeah, getting to go through the world, having this special thing that I got to be a part of. And whenever I found other people that were mixed race too, it kind of felt like I have these little radars like bing bing bing. Oh my gosh, you're like me. You're confusing looking. Like people don't know what you are. That I guess that's one interesting thing about being mixed race is that y- whether it's a good or bad thing, people don't really know what to make of you right off the bat. And in some ways, it makes you a little bit of a chameleon. Like growing up, some people thought that I was Hispanic. It wasn't until later that some people were like, "Oh, I think you're part Asian," even though it was something that I felt inside of myself. But yeah, I think as I've grown too, it's been beautiful to get to be part of more communities. Growing up, I had some of my best friends were Asian growing up, but there was not a ton in my community growing up, and my Japanese side of my family is actually really small. It was my aunt and my grandmother, and that was kind of it. We have some distant family in Japan, but we didn't really get to see them. So, getting into college and I found another best friend who was Japanese there. And then after college through YouTube, finding this huge Asian community through YouTube, um, and getting to connect to more of that side of myself has been really, really beautiful. And I'm just so grateful for it too.
So your Hapa, that means your daughter, right? You have a daughter
Mhm.
now. Your daughter is Kwapa.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
and I think that's very cool. The Japanese American community since the 1970s has had the highest outmarriage rate of any
Wow.
Asian population ethnicity in the US.
Oh,
So there are more Kwapas and, uh, one fifth Japanese Americans now than there
yeah.
used to be. Hapa is very common now. So, um, and I see like on TV and in movies. So this back to acting. Uh, there seem to be lots more opportunities for mixed race Asian actors
Hmm.
with roles. So just keep that in mind. Got
Yeah.
some opportunities coming up.
Yeah.
And have you been to Japan?
I have. Yeah. Let's see. The first time I ever went to Japan was when I was 12, and my grandmother, she decided early on that when each one of me and my sisters turned 12, she was going to take us to Japan with her for a month. So my older sister had already gone and done that adventure, and when I turned 12, my grandmother took me, and it was a really, I'd never been out of the country, and then to go to Japan for a month, I think half of it was kind of exploring Tokyo and Kyoto, but then the other half, I think it was half, I had a really, really cool experience where my grandmother had some close friends that lived in Chichibu, and we got to go live with their family. And my grandmother actually left then, but I stayed with this family and I went to school. I don't know if it was for 1 week or 2 weeks, but I went to school in Japan and I spoke no Japanese. It was a very interesting experience, but getting to be plopped like right in the middle of what really is Japanese culture, what is Japanese school like, what are Japanese kids like, was so fascinating and so amazing. Like, just the way that the Japanese kids welcomed me in, even though we couldn't communicate at all, and just looking through their desks to give me omiyage and really welcoming me and getting to see how Japanese people treat their schools. It was really beautiful. Just like everybody cleaned and everybody cooked, and that was just part of everybody's job. Um, so I think, that was a huge, huge dose of Japan when I was young. That was really impactful and very cool. Then I didn't go back until I was in my probably mid to late 20s when I went for music for the first time. Is that right? Did I? Maybe I went with my sisters once before that, and then I went back to start playing shows there. And I I think every time I go, I've just fallen more and more in love with it. Um, I don't know. I think as I get older, I appreciate nature more and more too, and just everything about Japan is so beautiful. So I love going back, and my family and I went back to Japan maybe 4 years ago. The whole family got to go, and my mom hadn't gone since she was 20, and my dad had never been. So that was very cool to get to experience it as a whole family, and yeah, we ate a lot, and it was really great. I guess it was maybe like 6 months ago at this point that my mom's doctors told us, I what we are recommending is that she needs to have a blood stem cell transplant as soon as possible. She is still strong, her best chance. And that was this huge wake up. Family and I were like, okay, if that's her best chance, then we need to make she has a chance. And started looking, and at this point, my mom in the entire global red match, and that was like this huge fire lit under. And I'm so grateful that I have any online call because I have this opportunity to spread the message and get the word out. And we've talked a little bit about what Asians are represented in the registry. So for people who need a transplant to save, they just sometimes can't find them, and it's so frustrating. If you could get every Asian person, every Japanese person to just swab that, and hundreds, actually thousands more people be saved because people act like that. So we've just been thinking about this these past months, like how to spread this message, how do people know how easy it is to potentially save someone's life. We've been doing work online to spread.
I'm so glad that you have a vehicle to your mom and others, and you know, I'm sure we all send our best wishes to your mom.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I hope it works out, and that more people sign up, and that you find a donor. So, yeah. So, Kina, thank you so much for joining us and spending this much time with us. And uh, love your music, love
Thank
your message, love the work that you do in the community, and what you're doing for Asian Americans as a whole and for Japanese Americans. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. It's been lovely talking to you, and I'm very grateful that you guys are helping and getting this message out too. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Help Kina and her mother, as well as countless others, by registering to be a donor with Be the Match. which is a community of donors, volunteers, healthcare professionals, and researchers who deliver cures by helping patients get the life-saving marrow transplant they need. Register at bethematch.org.